Today we're swapping out the rotor on an RS5 series scooter from Roadrunner. Although the process is pretty similar for most scooters, let's check it out. Hey guys, it's Steve from Scooter King, and in this episode, we're actually going to swap out the rotor on the front wheel of our RS5 series scooter from Roadrunner. Now, this is true of all of the models, so the Max, the Pro, all the lines, all basically use the same rotor design. So it's super easy to do, and Roadrunner, thankfully, makes it pretty straightforward because we have motor quick disconnects. So the front and the back are really easy to get off. You'll need to remove the lug nut covers, and sometimes they come off easy, sometimes they come off in a pile. So if you don't have those, you might want to have a few standing, in line in case you tear them up. You can get them from Roadrunner and other scooters as well. You'll also need a wrench for the lug nuts when you get them off. And really, maybe most importantly, is a good set of Allen wrenches. Make sure that you've got a decent set of these. This is so important because these are sized correctly. They're not going to be a lot of play and slop like you get with the temp, little kit that comes with your scooter itself. I promise you, you're gonna strip or cross thread a lot of those bolts that are on the rotor and other places on the scooter. Save yourself the headache. Get a decent set of wrenches. Depending on whether or not you've taken your lug nut covers off before, will have a lot to do with how easy they are to get all the crap off of the lug nut itself. So if it's the first time you've taken them off, they're on there pretty stout. They use some kind of silicone, black silicone, and they can be pretty challenging. So you're probably gonna have to clean up the lug nuts before you can even unscrew them. But once you do and you get it all cleaned up, it's pretty straightforward. These just come off. A tire iron set to that size actually works great. This is just one off my pickup truck. And then you need to separate the washers from the side of the swing arms. That's pretty straightforward to do as well. This just means getting all the gunk from the lug nut glue out of it. From here, once these are loosened and the washers are loosened up from the swing arms, removing the rotor is pretty straightforward. And first off, you just want to release the motor disconnect. And this just unscrews with a big fat cable on one side of the swing arm. And once it's unscrewed, then you can basically just drop the motor out into your hand. From here, we're going to remove the front brake caliper assembly. We're not going to take the entire brake assembly apart with all the pads and all that stuff. We're literally going to leave it all together, and we're just going to take it off the bracket. That way, all of our adjustments stay intact, and putting it back together is a lot easier to do. So we're just going to remove the two bolts that hold the brake caliper assembly itself to the brake bracket. Once these are completely loosened, the entire brake caliper assembly just pops off the rotor. It makes it super easy to change. We leave the bracket on the swing arm completely intact, so everything will be exactly in the same place when we just pop it back on the new rotor. This makes it quick and dirty, and it makes it a lot easier to swap these out in a hurry. If you've had a really hard riding season, then sometimes the motor, needs to be tapped out of the swing arm holders itself. And if so, just get, a plastic headed hammer. You don't need to be reefing on the parts, and they certainly don't need to be bent. And this will allow you just to loosen up the safety washer on both sides. And then from there, really, it'll just tap out into your hands here. And using a rubber hammer like this just means you're not going to do any damage to the lug nut itself or the threads on the axle. Both those are super important, and you want to make sure those are in good shape when you put them back on. Once the motor is free, this is a great time to clean up the threads around the axle and just the motor wire connection. These get a lot of wear and tear, especially on a rough riding season if you're doing a lot of off-road stuff. And they can get pretty beat up, so it's a great time to kind of clean them up with a wire brush and just make sure that there's really not a lot of gunk and stuff in the threads and also behind that safety washer, because that can get a lot of stuff trapped back there. It's also a good time to look at the motor wire connection and make sure that that's not frayed, and if so, you might want to tape that up just for a little bit more wear and tear protection when you're out on really rough terrain or especially wet terrain. Once everything is cleaned up, we can start unscrewing each one of the individual rotor screws. And this is really where having a good Allen or hex set pays dividends. It'll keep you from stripping or rounding out the inside Allen key cavity of these screws because they're pretty soft. And a lot of people have actually taken them out and then replaced them with harder screws just to keep that from happening, but a good hex set will keep that from being a problem, and then we can unscrew each one of them one by one and then eventually free up the rotor completely from the motor. And if you look carefully at it, you'll notice it has a direction marker here, and this is the direction of travel, so we'll need to make note of that when we put the new rotor back on. Once we get the new rotor ready to put on the motor here, we'll look at the direction of travel. We can hold these two together, and it takes surprisingly little to damage a rotor. So you can see here, there's just a little bit of play between the two. It's clearly out of round, but it doesn't take much with a rotor because all of that out of round is going to rub up against your pads, especially at high speeds. So we'll check the direction of travel, and then we'll mount the new rotor in its place. And before we start screwing in the rotor screws, we're going to put some Loctite on them. And this will really help them keep from working their way out, especially during a long riding season where you're really pushing the scooter hard or you're doing a lot of off-roading. These will keep them from working their way back out. And a real word of caution here. If you're using the same rotor screws and you've got them coated with Loctite, you don't have to reef on these things when you put them back in. So just seat them all first. Go around the entire rotor, make sure the rotor is seated correctly, and seat each screw individually. And then when you're done, you can go about screwing them the rest of the way. But these don't have to be cranked down. They're super easy to overturn. So take your time, the Loctite will do its job, and just seat them in place, and just a little bit past that should be fine. Once the new rotor is on the motor, reinstallation is just the opposite of removal. And we'll use that same plastic hammer to kind of tap these back into place. And these are pretty heavy motors, surprisingly, so it might take a bit to hold it with one hand and align it, but once it's in place, it goes back in pretty quick. And then the real trick here is just to make sure that the safety washers themselves are in that little groove and bracket before you tighten down the lug nut. And we're also going to do the same thing that we did to the rotor screws themselves. We're going to put a little bit of Loctite on the lug nut bolts themselves, and this just helps keep things in place, keep stuff from working its way loose when we're riding really hard. It's also super important to make sure that the motor axle sits firmly into the forks of the swing arm so that there's no excess play on one side or the other, and that it's at exactly 90 degrees. The safety washers on each side help to ensure this, but you just want to make sure that the rotor is true to the frame. Once everything is nice and straight, we can put the brake caliper assembly back onto the brake bracket and tighten this all back up again. And not disassembling the calipers means our brake adjustment should be pretty close to where we left it. And our final step is just to take a little bit of brake cleaner on a rag here and clean up the rotor itself, just to make sure that we don't have any excess oils from our hands or any of the other tools and stuff. Once you get the brand new rotor on and it's seated correctly and the whole thing's put back together again, you might experience a little bit of noise. That's pretty common, and that just means it takes a little bit for the brand new rotor to get used to the pressure pattern of the calipers and the pads. So that usually goes away pretty quick. All right, so as you can see, swapping out the rotors is pretty straightforward on the RS5 series of scooters from Roadrunner. This one happens to be a Max, and this is really a pretty similar process on just about most, other scooters that you might actually be using as well. And thankfully, Roadrunner makes this process pretty quick and dirty because of the quick disconnects on the front and rear motors. It makes changing this stuff out a lot faster. And like I said before, probably the biggest favor you can do yourself is get a decent set of wrenches. This will save you so much headache. You won't cross thread and strip things as easily, and this really just saves you a ton of hassle. Hey, thanks for hanging out with me, guys. I appreciate it. If you learned something or if this was helpful in any way, please hit the subscription and notification bells. It helps keep a young channel like this growing, it helps keep it going, and it helps me make more videos like this for you guys. Stay safe, get out there, rip it up, have a great time. We'll catch you in the next video.